More from the 20th anniversary gathering of Take Control authors. This is MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is part 2 of our show with Take Control authors on their 20th anniversary reunion. It's a whole lot of fun. A lot of great stories are told, but also there's a lot of perspective in how eBooks changed everything. Let's go back and let this distinguished panel do the talking.
Yeah, and
Adam said something about the sausage earlier, and one of the first things, my first print book was around 2001, and it was the process. You write 3 or 4 chapters, and you're sending them to the publisher, and then you're on chapter 5, and they send back chapter 1 in developmental edit. So you work on that. Then you get to chapter 7. Then you get chapter 2 in developmental edit and chapter 1 in copy edit. And you couldn't keep track of all of that. And for a big book, it was really hard. And so the idea of write the whole thing, send it to Tonya, she gets back to you, doing it all at once instead of chopping it up like that made it so much easier to keep it in my head as I was working.
Yeah, and I have to agree about the editing into layout, because you would get everything approved and to your satisfaction, to your editor's satisfaction, and you think more or less you're done except for layout. But then the layout person, like you said, is frequently done by someone who doesn't understand the book and makes changes for layout purposes. And I can't tell you the number of times. Of course, then you have to go over it. You can't assume that just because it was perfect for when you sent it back that it's still that way. And so you have to carefully go over the layout version. And then I was going to say, I can't tell the number of times that I discovered changes that were not only not what I would have made, but changed 180 degrees the intent of what I was trying to say. And so I said, no, that's not what I meant. I meant the opposite. I have to change it back.
And I'm dealing with a company where they have layouts, and they're supposed to do the layout before it goes to me. But the last 2 books have been like, well, we haven't had time to do that, so we'll do the formatting later. Except it's such a mess that I think you need a bulleted list here. So I'm sitting here and I'm spending a good day formatting. I'm formatting it before it's going to be laid out anyway, guessing that like the author is like, well, I think you have a step procedure here, so I'll create one. I'll leave you a note, rather than I want to see it all laid out. I want to so that the layout person has made those decisions. I'm like, why am I? Yeah. But you're taking me back to the memories of like 2001. I was working for a company where the technical writers were sending me a package with the paper document, and I went, no, you can do track changes in Word, and you're going to trust the editors to do it, and then we will send you the document back in Word with track changes. And I had to teach them how to use track changes, but then they realized how much faster it went. So
who remembers?
Incredible.
I got a second. I think that Jeff Carlson was going to say something a while back about what grabbed his attention about the different process when he did his first book.
See, as a writer, I'm like, I can't jump in. So one of the things that I wanted to build on, especially what Matt was saying, I also have come from the traditional print book world. I've published a whole bunch of books. And in addition to the royalty factor, which was great, everything that we've said so far about track changes and having, working in edits and all of that, one of the things that made a huge difference to me is that as soon as that book was released, you started to know exactly how it was doing, because when a sale is made, you get an email indicating that there's a sale. In the book world, you're not going to know if your book has been selling for 3 months, 6 months. Maybe your editor will have that information. You won't get any royalties from it if it earns out. So Take Control books don't have to earn out because there's no advance, as Kirk said. And there's just this, like with the print books, you're always playing this long game. Is the thing that I'm doing now going to pay off next year? And with Take Control books, call me a little monkey that has to keep hitting a lever, but like you know right away if it's working, and you know right away, like, is this a book that is successful? Is this a book that looks like we're going to be doing another edition? Or if you write a book about, say, I don't know, Lightroom CC to an audience of people who don't really use Lightroom, you know pretty quickly that this is not going to have any legs and we're not going to do anything more from it. So there's definitely that challenge of, front loading all the work and getting all that done and then releasing it and hoping. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention here is that I think Adam and Tonya and Joe have done a really good job of nurturing the audience and getting people who want this sort of book. That also, I think a lot of readers are better about, communicating feedback. And surprisingly not, real negative feedback, but just, hey, here's the thing that you may not have considered, or, I have another question about this, or et cetera. And so having that versus just, hey, there's a book, we're going to go put it on the shelf at Barnes and Noble and see how it does. It's really a foundational change in publishing that I don't think most people really appreciate.
And the only
one of the things that's one thing that's really interesting was with we tried from the very beginning to use a kind of a slightly nasty marketing term to own the customer. I mean, the book publishers had no sense of who their customers were, and they didn't really talk to them or hear from them or hear what they wanted or get any feedback about anything. And so by maintaining TC Announce, the Take Control Announce list, and building that with as many people as we could. You ordered a book, you were on it. That's why Joe and I were talking earlier. There's people who have bought over 100 books from Take Control. What publisher can possibly say that otherwise?
No, and I've noticed that there are a lot of people who buy the books who then buy additional copies for friends. I've seen the same name popping up in those emails over and over again. There was one purchaser of the book who bought 9 copies. And I can't remember his name, but he was my favorite person for a good long time.
And this is astonishing because so many commercial publishers want to put DRM on their books. You cannot copy it. If you buy an ebook, you can't give it to anyone else. Take Control books have never been copy protected. So that guy who bought the 9 books didn't have to. He wanted to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's important that when you have a Take Control book, you need one for every room of your house.
Because they're electronic. So,
Exactly.
So Josh,
one for your iPhone, one for your Kindle, one for your TV,
Exactly.
Josh, you came in later than most everyone else here, I think. What was the thing that because you didn't have book publishing experience before this, I don't think. What was it that you were most intrigued by when you got into it?
What did not scare you away?
But it's sort of interesting because I think, didn't we stream Take Control of Apple TV originally, or am I misremembering that? I seem to remember we published that in installments in tidbits.
We did that with several books.
Yeah, and then of course there was the book that Joe tweeted, the entire book.
Yeah.
Take control of your paperless office.
Yes.
We shredded it into Twitter.
Yeah.
See how that turned out.
Is anyone going to mention that there were actually print books? And I'm not talking about print on demand, but the 2 or 3 Peachput books that compiled some of the early Take Control titles?
Oh, that's
right.
We
were talking about that the other day.
Yep.
Look at him.
There's your guy. Hey, look at that.
Yep.
Look at the Engst both going for it.
I think I have a Take Control book in my files. I think I did.
Yeah. Oh, Time's got the tiger one. Yeah,
I think you showed the Panther one.
Yes, I did.
So
we were pretty good friends with Peachpit Press at the time, and they were really intrigued with what we were doing, and they basically wanted more titles, and so we talked to them about doing combining some of the books into print books. So this Take Control of Panther, was the first 4 books, upgrading, customizing, Matt's customizing, Kirk's users and accounts, and Glenn's sharing files.
We even did 2 real world books. I mean,
Adam,
it's Take Control book, but we rebundled it.
Yeah.
And why don't you open those print books? I want to see if it was the internal design of the book the same as the Take Control, or did it have to be relayed out?
No, this guy Jeff Tolbert, our GarageBand author, he laid them all out for us.
This one was gorgeous. I mean, he did a really nice job. A lot of color. Because each book had its own color in this one. But it was interesting though, because these were books that were huge hits with our audience at $5 a piece. That was what our first price was. I mean, I was looking back, and I think at our first anniversary, I think we said we sold 24,000 books in the first year. And yet the print books never did well. That the secret sauce wasn't any one thing; it was the whole package. And so, even the content, which was fabulous, wasn't sufficient to, if we turned it into a Peach Pit book, just didn't catch on in the same way.
Well, and also part of that is
remembering
being
correctly.
Based on. Sorry, part of that is being based on the fact that just getting the book to a buyer, there's like 4 different levels, because you have like a regional salesperson, and then you've got another salesperson, and this is your account rep at Barnes and Noble, and
Carla from Borders. Right.
Exactly, and all competing for very limited shelf space. Whereas the Take Control book, it's like, hey, wonderful audience that we've interacted with before, we've got a new thing about this topic that we think you're going to like. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah. And especially at $5 or $10, they were like, yes, of course, I need this. You
don't have to get up and go to a bookstore, which is more resistance than some people have when they need
have to take your pajamas off.
Now.
Yeah.
Am I misremembering, or did Take Control sell more books in the first month than you expected in the first year, or something like that?
So we were telling the story. we were telling the story the other day. Yeah, it was basically we sold more. I'd set up this sort of special deal with Kagi, so we could use a dedicated merchant account through their front end. Again, this is well before there were really systems for doing online sales in quite the same way. And we actually, when you set up a merchant account, you have to tell them how much money you think you're going to make in the first year, because you could be returns for 6 months. And I guessed at $5,000. Like, I don't know. This was a complete, hey, let's put on a show kind of scenario, right? We had no business plan exactly. We went over that in the first 24 hours.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. But again, what Jeff was saying, it wasn't even. You get those email messages coming in for every order, and Tonya and I developed this finely honed sense of velocity of email messages, because it was true for like anything. We'd send out email to TC Announce, and we'd watch, start watching the messages come back in from the orders, and go like, oh boy, we got a live one. Or like,
and the first 30 to 45 minutes were basically predictive of the success of the entire book,
which was crazy. It was really true though.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and also, as you just briefly touched on, no returns. A lot of people.
Well, there were returns. We would honor a return, but there just weren't very many.
We might have had like 10 a year.
But you're right. It's not, Jeff, but you're referring to the way the bookstores would get, like 500 books, and then they would sell 20 of them, and then they would return 480 of them with the covers ripped off, because that's useful.
And then they get credit for that. And then the author is like, oh, you know what? We thought we sold 500 books, but you actually sold 20. And 6 months. 6 months after, you're like, I thought this was a good title. And the publisher's like, yeah, that's actually not bad. You're just like,
oh.
Well, I don't know about you, but my first book came out in 1995. And when I was doing a lot of traveling back then. And so whenever I got to a new city, I'd go to a bunch of bookstores and say if they wanted me to sign them. because once you sign a book, it's considered marked up and they can't return it. So that was a little benefit to it, but it's also an ego stroke to keep on signing books. And I think that I visited probably 100 bookstores, and only one of them did I see my book fronted with more than 3 copies. In every other bookstore, if I saw 1 or 2 copies on the shelf, that was it. And great to sell the 1 copy, but then no one browsing that section is going to see it again unless they reorder it. With electronic books, it's out the door, and there's no worry about inventory messing up the sales.
Yeah. I had a book signing and 0 people came.
I'm sure we could tell lots of book signing tales. Oh my God.
I had a book signing with 1 person, and I thought that was bad. But you got it.
I had a book signing.
It is.
So Glenn Fleischman and I, we wrote a 1,000-page book on Adobe Go Live. And Michael, I know you're really pushing to try to, get that Pages book up to that level, but don't do it. And so I went to the How Design conference. I was a speaker there one year, and after my session, they had me sit down where there was going to be, a little book signing area. So I'm here at a table, and I've got my real world Adobe Go Live. And of course, it's a 1,000-page book, and I had brought 10 of them or something. And then next to me, and I can't remember who it was, but there was world famous designer guy who had also just finished a session. And
probably Bertman Roy.
No, bigger than that. Like not computer design, but design, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like legend. And so I'm here, he's there. And the room they had is one of these big hotel conference rooms. And there's a line just goes all the way out the door and around for him. And I'm just sitting here and the looks of pity on all these people patiently waiting. They look over at me and they're like, "So what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I wrote a book on Go Live." "Oh, was
That's
it fun?"
Nice, dear.
"Yeah, it was great." "Okay." And that was it. Yeah. So, have we done did we ever do any signings or meets at Macworld for Take Control? Was there any in-person kind of things?
We all
did talks.
One year, I can't remember what the book was, but I remember going to the Smile booth back when Smile was still Smile, and Jean was there, and she wanted an autograph of one of my eBooks. So I'm like, "All right, give me your iPad. I will superimpose my signature on the PDF on your iPad. There you go."
We did a bunch of sessions, but a book signing was never really the kind of the thing. And I think part of it was that we all had those stories of almost no one coming to a book signing. I actually did have once in my life the book signing you dream of, which was at a Macworld Expo in Boston. I think it was Power Computing bought my Internet Starter Kit for Macintosh book. They bought 400 copies and gave them away. And so, I had the line because it was free. Who's not going to take the free book that can get signed by the author? So,
also didn't it come with $500 for the software?
Well, there was that too. It was a good deal.
And it was Macworld Expo. Macworld Expo had a great audience for all these things.
Right.
Yeah, I did book signs at Macworld Expo, and they went pretty well. But the publisher Peach Pit was occasionally pressuring me to want to do book signings at bookstores like Barnes and Noble and Borders, and I always refused because I'd go into the store and I'd see my 2 copies of the book if I were lucky, and I'd come back in a few days and the 2 copies would still be there. And I'm thinking, if I hold a book signing, who's going to show up? I mean, the 2 copies aren't selling. Why am I going to get more than 2 people to show up for a book sign? And so I never agreed to do it. And from the sound of things I'm listening to here, it's probably
didn't miss much.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So for a while, the book that Adam wrote, the Internet Starter Kit, it was the 5th most. It was the 5th internet book, but it was an enormous bestseller. And he'd go to Barnes and Noble and get, 5 people would show up. Right. So clearly this whole book signing thing was not for technology books.
Have any of you ever worked in a bookstore? I did for 3 years in the early 90s in France. And it gave me a real interesting point of view of everything about how the bookstore buys the books, what they return, how signings work and all that. And if you don't have that experience, you don't understand how difficult it is for the booksellers and for them to get customers in. I worked with this bookstore at a couple of like festival type things, and like we would handle books for one publisher, and there would be famous authors who would be sitting there and getting 2 people coming to visit. And this is a festival that had 20, 30,000 people over a weekend. So it's not just computer books, this is fiction and nonfiction and all of that. But working in a bookstore can be really enlightening to understand more about how the sausage is made after it comes out of the factory before it gets to the market.
Well, there's also the psychological space that a bookstore gives you that bookstores are a bit too much like libraries where we're all trained to be quiet. People don't like to have loud conversations in a bookstore because people who are browsing saying, "Shh, I'm trying to check this book out."
It's less that than the fact that the bookstore is trying to hedge its bets and not get too many of one book that's not going to sell because space is important.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas online, space doesn't matter. You have all the space you want.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, we love bookstores, but it was pretty clear by, a lot of the book signings I did, Ted, were actually not because I expected people were going to come, but because it was relationship building with one of the buyers in the hierarchy that Jeff was mentioning. And so, you were making, everyone was being happy with the networking that was going on, even if you didn't actually sell very many books. But I think that was a little bit of, again, what we were trying to avoid by going purely direct to the reader. We wanted to talk to the readers, and we knew there was sort of no way to do it physically, because if nothing else, no book can. Again, all these book signing stories we're telling, the audience for any given book is widely dispersed, and online is the one way you can bring those together. And
and don't forget. And I don't think anyone's mentioned up to now that all this time Tidbits was going gangbusters.
Yeah.
And very often there was bleed into Tidbits. So, I would take, a few pieces from some book, distill it down to a Tidbits article. And now we had the same material appearing to the other captive audience, which already existed before Take Control was, a gleam in anybody's eye. And so there was a synergy between Take Control and Tidbits, without which I think the Take Control books probably would never have gone anywhere to start with.
Absolutely.
Another one of those puzzle
Several
pieces.
of us wrote for Macworld and had excerpts in Macworld, but I don't think those Macworld excerpts ever drove sales very much, did they?
So a few of them early on did. As I'm sure Joe has done too, you get all these ideas you can do for marketing and you try them, and sometimes even they work pretty well, and you keep doing them, and then they work less and less well. I've never found the thing other than having your own mailing list and sending email to your mailing list and doing a sale a couple of times a year, things like that have really, really hit. So we used to do some excerpts in other places and whatnot. And, some of them were great. Some of them weren't. One of the things that kind of thing, when the iBookstore, and now called Apple Books, when the iBookstore opened, was right around the time that Take Control of iCloud came out. And it was one of our, it was early, one of our best selling books at the time. And we put it in the iBookstore, and it sold like hotcakes. It was great. For what, Joe? Remember, a month or two, 3 months?
It was very brief. Yeah.
And then this was like the race to the bottom. Someone published a 99-cent, everything you want to know about iCloud that was, 36 pages long. Half of it was incorrect, and our sales fell to the floor.
Yep.
Couldn't compete.
The thing that Take Control has done well is it's established a web presence. It has an identity, a place that people can go. And they're not competing with anybody else's books at takecontrol.com, but there's a ton of stuff to see.
Yeah. Amazon was another one of those big things. Can we get the books on Amazon? Well, we did. And you know what? never made much difference because you're competing with everything. It's just not fair. Like, being along with other people online is not a help. It might if you're in you're a florist and you're in the flower district in New York, because that's where all the florists are, but it's not true in the online world.
Well, and how many publishers have people who are loyal to the publisher? Like, when's the last time you bought a book because it was a Random House book? I can think of a handful of niche publishers where people are loyal to them, but it's a very rare thing.
In genre fiction, like Tor or Harlequin romances, that there is a loyalty there, but it's not. No one cares about the publisher for anything else.
Yeah, one thing that I can think of in the tech world would be like the missing manuals or the visual quick start guides.
I think the O'Reilly books. I mean, I think a lot of people bought my books from O'Reilly because they were O'Reilly books.
Yeah,
at the time.
With the right animal.
But a lot of, exactly. But a lot of those were also like devotion to the series, not necessarily the publisher. Yeah. And what I always liked about Take Control, and I think is still very much the case, is you knew who was behind it. Like, if you were buying something from Take Control, you got something from Adam or Tonya, or you get stuff from Joe, and it's not, well, we as the Faceless Take Control company are happy to present to you a book. Like, it's personal, and it feels like what I think a lot of us strive to do with in our writing and stuff is like, this is your buddy who is giving you some information that happens to be in an ebook form. And I know Joe knows a whole lot about this topic and a bunch of other topics. And the things that I bought from Joe have been good, and they haven't steered me wrong. So yeah, I'm gonna get this. Or, I met Adam and Tonya at Macworld once, and they told me about this, and I thought it was a great idea. And I know that their expertise has touched every one of these books. And I think that makes a difference for readers.
Yeah, I think it makes a difference for quality control assumptions too. That 99-cent books that I'm talking about aside, if I say I wanted to buy a book on iCloud or some topic, and I went and discovered that there are 20 books on the subject, most of which I'd never heard of, and how do I decide which one I want to spend my money on? I could spend a day, reading through excerpts of the books trying to figure it out. But if I go to Take Control, there's just a built-in assumption: these books are good. These books are probably this book is probably the best book on the subject that I'm likely to find, and so I can just buy it safely, without having to spend a lot of time researching it. It works very well.
That's what I wanted to say, is that I feel like the new guy, or one of the new guys here, because my book came out in 2018, so I was new to Take Control as of 5 years ago, but I can't remember how long I've been reading them, and I'm consistently blown away, especially by the people, those of you out there who've written 5, 6, a dozen, 60 books, just how much work goes into the original manuscript, the editing, the amount of work that goes into coming out with new editions all the time, and constantly keeping up with Apple's changes to their software. I've recommended other Take Control books more often than I recommended my own, not because I don't like my own. I'm thrilled by how the Take Control editing process made my book far better than my initial conception of it was. I mean, the template that came out, the style guide, my work with Joe, all contributed to making the book far better than I could have done on my own. But beyond that, I constantly see need for other Take Control books I'm an IT consultant, so I recommend these books all the time to people who need a crash course and aren't the kind of people who are going to read a 1,000-page book, but a 200-page book is perfect for them. So I salute my hats off to all of the rest of you, just for the incredible quality and I know how much work it is that goes into making these books as consistently excellent as they are. And I say that I don't think Joe's going to toot his own horn quite as loudly as I just did, but as the guy who's only written one Take Control book, I feel like I can say this to the rest of you without feeling like I'm patting myself on the back.
The Take Control Authors Reunion was so much fun, and the conversation was so good and so enlightening that we let it go for yet another show. So this group will be back next time on MacVoices to finish up all the discussions about ebook publishing over the years, how things have changed, and what Take Control books meant to them. Meanwhile, I want to remind you, TakeControlBooks.com is having a 20th anniversary sale. That means that every title in their library is only $5. They're taking it back to the original pricing of the Take Control books. So, visit TakeControlBooks.com, pick out your favorites, pick up all the ones you've been thinking about or wondering about, and add them to your library for only $5 each. TakeControlBooks.com. I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.